This isn't my home. I, Raeliana Macmillan, no, Hakuna, am currently living inside the world of a novel.
February 18th, 2017, Eunha was waitlisted for all the colleges she applied to and had been spending her days at the library waiting for an acceptance notice. Going up to the roof for fresh air, she reflected on having studied for an extra year for her entrance exams, but still doing horrible. That's when someone started talking to her. She's tried to remember their conversation since it might have led to clues about this world inside the novel, but she couldn't even remember the person's face, their voice, or what they had even talked about. All she could remember is that the conversation they had was fun. She then got a notice of her acceptance into a university, but as she was celebrating, she was shoved off of the roof by the other person. She had thoughts of her family and friends, but accepted her death in this short moment. However, opening her eyes, she woke up in this new world. She could hardly get used to her face, since she was never this beautiful in her real life. In this world, she was embraced by her loving little sister, Rosemary, two loving parents, and her father was a successful oil baron. She was now living a fairy tale life with this family that was nouveau riche, or having recently acquired wealth. Eunha came back from the dead as Raeliana, living a new life full of wealth and comfort. It all would have been perfect if she was a normal person. But Raeliana was a trivial minor character who would provide the reason for the novel's main character to return home in the case of the murdered friend. And unfortunately, Raeliana was that friend destined to die young. However, in this new life, she had no intention of experiencing death again. In the main story, Raeliana would die from arsenic poisoning from the tea her fiancé, Francis Brooks, made her every night. Francis already had the full trust of the Macmillan family, so it would be easy for him to persuade them in their moment of sorrow to take over the family business. That's when the main character enters to solve the mystery. But Ray would be dead by then. She needed to cancel the engagement. But how? Both families agreed to this, and though only through name, the Brooks were a respected noble family. She couldn't cancel the engagement without a good reason. But if she revealed Francis was trying to kill her, no one would believe her. She first tried telling him she wanted to break up, and he only ignored her, saying, "Look, what an amazing crow," he'd never seen before. For her second attempt, she bought the book Idiot's Guide to Breakups, and from it, she learned to accidentally, purposely spill her drink all over him, and left him at the restaurant to pay for the bill. Still, this didn't make him dump her either. On her third attempt, she almost accidentally shot him with a hunting rifle. She was quite a good shot, since in this world, she'd gone hunting with her father since she was young. But no matter what, he wouldn't annul their engagement. He grabbed her wrist. She'd tell him to let go, and that's when he'd finally go mask off, telling her, "I don't know what you're playing at, but it's no use. The Macmillan family needs the Brooks family's title as Marquess. You think a nouveau riche like you will find better engagement than this? Very soon, we will be husband and wife. So before then, you better learn how to behave in front of your husband." I hate this guy. And so did Raeliana. She wished he would just die. Luckily, she spot her chance to escape this deadly marriage through the Duke of the Kingdom, Noah Wynknight, the male protagonist of the novel. This was the novel world of Kingdom of Chambers. The progress of science and technology, the birth of prominent thinkers, the downfall of the church, and the rise of capitalism. These were just a few of the many reasons why royal authority was falling weak. While new nobles who bought their titles were growing in number, so too did the power struggle between the nouveau riche, the new rich, and the vieux riche, the old rich. The old nobility's rise to power threatened royal authority. So the royal family tried to form an alliance with the new nobility. Then the old nobles decided to prevent the new nobles from gaining more influence. So they came up with a bill that forbade the transfer of noble titles. However, the royal seal needed during the legislative process vanished. When talk amongst the nobility about finding another way to suppress the new nobility began, the person who showed up like a comet out of the sky was Noah. He ranked first in line to the throne as the current king's younger brother. House Wynknight was the main contributor to the crucial military strength that had established the kingdom for generations. Noah was also the first son of the former queen. He was the last bastion of the conservatives. Although he had stepped down from succeeding the throne because of a scandal, he aptly fulfilled the old nobility's expectations by becoming the head of House Wynknight. Rayliana realized she could call off her engagement to Francis by getting engaged to someone of a higher title, and Duke Wynknight could be her answer. Since she knew what happened in the future of the novel, she had the edge in getting him on her side. Meanwhile, Jake Langston was whispering subtle threats to Francis, reminding him their client was worried about Francis's engagement to Rayliana. If Francis failed to get married to her, that could be the end of his life. Francis then stormed off to find her, angry that she wasn't being more obedient, wondering why she seemed like a different woman these days. She at this time had found Noah and graced herself before him. He would then introduce himself, and she was almost caught off guard, nearly falling for his good looks. Proposing a deal to him, she knew this normally smiling face of an angel wasn't his true self. Mentioning she knew something about the royal seal, he began to smirk. She knew he was two-faced, with insides more wicked than the devil himself. She was stunned to find her conversation being interrupted by Francis, but thinking fast, she went to Noah's side, apologizing to Francis, telling him that she and the Duke had feelings for each other. Noah looked at her coldly, so she mouthed "royal seal" in a way he could read her lips. He then smirked and pulled her in close. Rayliana had won. She began to take her leave, and when Francis tried to stop and shout at her, Noah would brush him off, telling Francis that was enough. He was making it very clear that Francis no longer had the right to refer to Rayliana as his fiancée. The next morning, she would wake up with a hangover, getting called by her maid that a guest was here to see her. That guest was Duke Wynknight. She couldn't believe it. He came presenting a bouquet of flowers, but her complexion was pale. Of course, she was still recovering from drinking the night before. He'd hit her with smooth words, telling her he could hardly wait to see her again. But she'd get him out of here, with a little bit of throwing up. She'd recover with a bit of ice cream, thinking about how she lost her ability to drink. Since Rayliana was such a lightweight, her maid Alma was curious about her relationship with the Duke. So she'd explain they happened to meet last night, and the two just happened to have a lot in common. She would later explain to her parents she never loved Francis, and only agreed to the engagement for the betterment of their house, now wanting to choose love. Surprisingly, her parents were fine with this, since she'd been a good daughter, having done whatever they asked of her all this time. They just wanted her to be happy. They loved her unconditionally and rooted for her love to come true. As soon as she felt their deep affection for her and a sense of relief, her heart started pounding and she suddenly felt ashamed. It caused her heart pain, knowing she couldn't tell them she wasn't their real daughter. The news had a huge headline reading, "Is Rayliana Macmillan the Cinderella of our time? Will the glass slipper fit?" She laughed, reading the Oil King's daughter being described as Cinderella, because if it were back in modern times, where the price of oil was sky high, Noah would be the one they'd call Cinderella. With her entering the study at his mansion, he told her to cut the formalities. He wanted to hear what she knew about the royal seal. So, she plainly told him that while everyone in the public thought he was desperate searching for the royal seal, the one he could use to pass the law the old nobles wanted to prevent the transfer of titles through, she knew exactly where the seal was. Noah had the seal the entire time. Being the leader of the old nobility, no one would have suspected he'd be the one in possession of the seal. This was the scheme put together by the royal family. Noah wasn't truly trying to lead the old nobility, but instead, he was really just the king's pawn. The only people who knew about this were the Duke, the people closest to the royal family, and Eunha, the outsider in this fantasy. Noah tried to kick her out, pretending this was merely a farce, thinking she had no proof. So she countered, mentioning the seal was buried at his brother Robert's grave. He would still dismiss her regardless, until she mentioned how noble society was moving through a chess allegory. That's when he'd offer to make a deal. Seeing how cocky he was, she was starting to think she'd chosen a man far worse than Francis. He wanted to hear her reason why she wanted him to be her pretend fiancé. She couldn't exactly tell him, "Oh, I come from a different world, and there, I read about this world in a novel. And that's how I know why my current fiancé wants to kill me and the current location of the royal seal. She decided to tell him instead that she received the info that her fiancé wanted to kill her, but she didn't have any proof nor witness to support it. She needed a reason to break off the engagement to Francis as soon as possible. Noah sneered at her reasoning all the way through, causing her endless frustration. She finally settled on closing their deal by saying she only needed him to be her pretend fiancé for 6 months. Then after that, she'd disappear without a trace. She pressured him to sign the contract. And so he did. But during this time, he'd indulged this ridiculous act. He needed her to do her duty as his fiancée when he needed her to. Something she definitely wasn't ready for. Raeliana later stared nervously at the headlines declaring she was in a shocking love triangle. Francis was apparently seeking compensation claims for the damage caused by this one-sided engagement cancellation, and her family responded they were prepared to fight this lawsuit. She had no idea he would stoop this low. But if she had known, she could have ended the engagement with money and would have never signed the contract with the Duke. Her next issue was dealing with Adam Taylor, the man assigned by Noah to exclusively guard her. At 18 years old, most would say he's too young to be a guard. However, he was quite an important character in the novel who had been a child soldier from a very young age. He's fought on many battlefields and famously came back alive from the Battle of Hashlap Valley untouched. When the Royal Duke halted the use of child soldiers, House Wynknight took them in and had them become their knights. The maids made a great fuss about seeing Adam assigned to her, thinking it was Noah's proof of love, but in reality, she saw him as the man who'd immediately cut off her neck if he found her moves suspicious. Aside from all that, her biggest issue with him is that he was so reserved and never spoke. Meeting with one of the Wynknight housemaids, Eunha, she would bring up Adam's red eyes, referring to his nickname as the Grim Reaper. Those red eyes meant he was a descendant of the Alsalsa, a small northern barbarian tribe filled with talented swordsmen. There was a strong prejudice about them in this kingdom apparently. They say the Alsalsa's eyes were red because they drank blood. However, Raeliana would dismiss this, saying Adam was a hero and the Duke's knight. Moving forward, she commanded Eunha to not speak rudely about him. The maid then shifted to giving Raeliana the chocolate-covered almonds she requested, and with Raeliana walking away, she thought maybe it was normal for people to react and discriminate against others in this world. Later, she'd be visited by her younger sister, Rosemary, who had come to pray for her and the Duke to be happy. Raeliana loved her sweet little sister. Rosemary then let go of her balloon, but got sad, seeing it stuck in a tree. She was trying to let it go up in the sky, because it was supposed to take her prayers to the gods. She was worried the gods might forget her prayer because the balloon took too long to go up. Adam reacted quickly, setting the balloon free using his sword, and Raeliana was surprised, but thankful. Rosemary then gave him a candy as thanks, and with Raeliana learning he loved sweets, she handed him her whole baggie, thinking now he was more adorable and childlike than she originally thought. He started fighting in battlefields at a young age, so that probably meant he was unable to do things regular children enjoyed. She told him to look after her well, thinking to give him plenty of treats from now on. Picking up Raeliana from her house the next day, she was stunned seeing the massive carriage sent by the Duke. The horses looked like they were carrying a house around. She didn't have that much luggage she wanted to bring. At House Wynknight, she was greeted by head butler Gideon Jura, and had to put up with him explaining the history of this mansion that housed the Wynknights for hundreds of years. She was exhausted by the end of her house tour. Lying on her bed, she was jump-scared by Noah, frantic, wondering how long he's been here and why he came into her room without knocking. He was, of course, here to greet his fiancée who moved into his place today, and giving his devilish smirk, he reminded her she'd be starting her bridal lessons soon. As you like this video and subscribe to my channel, because here at my Shoujo Weekly, I experienced depression because this video took so long to make. But you can cure it by watching this video to the very end, helping me make tons of money. I mean joy from your smiling face. You can also watch other manhwa videos I have on the channel like this one. There's even a whole playlist for them. So come on, hit that subscribe or I'll probably die. Raeliana wanted to fine-tune the details not written in their contract. Mostly that she wanted privacy when in her room. Noah didn't want to listen at first, but accepted. Taking his leave, he referred to her as my beloved Raeliana in a way that made her want to barf. Thinking more about it though, she also had to act like she was in love with him, but she felt a little nervous calling him anything other than Your Highness. He lifted up her chin, telling her that if she didn't train herself to say something, The words wouldn't come out naturally during crucial moments. Up close, he asked, "So, what is my name?" And she was stunned, barely uttering his name in 2 spaced syllables. He had her say his name twice. And after he left, she was so pissed, she started beating her pillow. Outside her room, he was cracking up. He asked Adam what he thought of her, and thinking about the treats she gave him, he replied, "She's a strange woman." Noah couldn't believe this. These words were akin to a compliment, considering Adam almost never spoke. Tea, dance, embroidery. Eunha was extremely appalled at first having to learn it all. But luckily, Rayliana grew up well, in a rich household, having received advanced education. Her body moved naturally during the lessons, just as it did when shooting a gun. The Liege Empire, the predecessor to the Kingdom of Chammers, had a class system that was abolished when the kingdom was established, but it still affected some aspects of society to this day. Education inequalities were an example of this. So where Rayliana would fit in the class of Astota, right below the top, she should lack some basic knowledge. However, Eunha was well versed in things like that, given her otherworld education. But being studious didn't prepare her for Noah to say he was going to announce their engagement tonight at a ball, and that their engagement ceremony would be in 1 week. She felt small compared to her flamboyant stylist, Nick Maddox. Doing her makeup, she was surprised seeing herself. Her dark circles were gone, and her skin felt like porcelain. Nick guaranteed he would make her the star of the ball. Her worries began to wash away, especially with how stunning she looked in her dress. And while he did her hair, he explained the 2 smiles currently trending in high society. There was the Noah Wynknight smile, given equally to all people that meant, "I'm not sure if what you're saying were actual words or crap right now." She couldn't learn this one, since only Noah could use it. The next one he'd refer to as the Vivian Shamel smile. He called Vivian a red fox of a woman, as he hit the pose perfectly. But what he wanted Rayliana to truly master was the smile he invented. His advice to replicate it: think of the person she hated the most, and imagine shooting them in the head. When she came out of her dressing room, Rayliana looked so good, Adam basically went mind-broken. Even Noah was caught off guard by how she looked. But she couldn't tell, since he didn't say a single word to her. She couldn't believe he wouldn't even give her an obligatory compliment. However, Gideon whispered to her that Noah was too embarrassed to honestly tell her she looked beautiful. She thought there was no way. Prior to entering the ball, Noah told her not to wander from his sight, not even for 5 minutes, and pointed out to 4 additional knights he employed to follow her, one being female, in case she needed to adjust her makeup in the bathroom. She couldn't believe how paranoid he was, and pitied anyone who became the target of his actual love. When another man asked her to dance, Noah guarded his fiancée, causing the other women to murmur and gush over how romantic he was. He then took Rayliana's hand for a dance, and while they looked beautiful outwardly, up close, they were continuously insulting each other. She then stepped on his foot, going, "Oh my, I made a mistake." In response, he dipped her, garnering tons of claps from everyone in the room as he told her, "We will dance again after you train some more." The back of her head felt like it had been burning for a while now from the glare of another woman. It was Vivian Shamel, a supporting character in the original story. She was the villainess, who had flirted with Noah countless times, but he never reciprocated. Heartbroken, she ended up accepting the king's marriage proposal and was the only candidate for queen. But when the female protagonist, Beatrice, started to date Noah, Vivian would meddle in everything they did. Rayliana tried her best to avoid Vivian, but Noah made her go deal with the woman next to her, Price Eretiel, explaining it was her duty as his fiancée. She was Marquess Eretiel's young wife, and there were secret meetings going on between the noble wives. He wanted Rayliana to get in on those secret meetings, since it was rumored that words exchanged there could influence the movement of a nation. Following his request, she bumped into Price while holding drinks, spilling some on her so they had an excuse to go wash up together. Of course, they couldn't get a private meeting without villainous Vivian bumping in on them. Vivian tried to throw Rayliana some disrespectful words, so in response, Rayliana readied her Nick Maddox smile, ready to throw down in the gauntlet of talking smack. Vivian felt the subtle disrespect Rayliana said through her kind words. Rayliana was subtly calling Vivian stupid. Vivian began to bite her lip in fury, but before she could counter back, Nick intervened, adding to the fire, asking when Vivian arrived, saying she had so little presence, he didn't even notice she was here. He basically provoked Vivian into targeting aggro on him, so Rayliana could escape with Price. Price didn't mind going with Rayliana, but felt like her entourage of 5 knights was a little much. So, Rayliana had them give her some space, save for the red-haired knight, Ainsley. Chatting privately, Price invited Rayliana to the secret wives meetings, but when they were going to head back to the ball, they were suddenly hit with a smoke screen, leading to Rayliana passing out and being captured before Ainsley could react. Converting a woman's love into money was Francis Brooks' only forte. With his decent looks and house name, he attracted naive and careless women to him like a magnet. Jake Langston's younger sister, Sophie, was one of them. She was so devoted to Francis, she ended up in debt because of him. However, all he left her was a cheap ring and parting words, saying they'd get married to each other one day. Unlike other ladies, Sophie didn't give up easily on Francis Brooks, and in order to change his heart, she threatened to end her own life. He tried his best to stop her, but accidentally forced the blade into her neck right in front of Jake. And seeing this, Jake extorted Francis to get engaged to Rayliana, wanting to siphon money from the Macmillan oil business after having her killed. Francis hated this, but had no choice. Rayliana woke up gasping, quickly putting together she'd been captured by Francis. Jake entered to taunt her, but no matter how hard she screamed, no one was around to hear her. He grabbed her cheeks, threatening her with his knife, then pushed her away, saying she was too cute. She was surprised to learn Jake was doing this because Francis killed his sister, and he began to cackle like a maniac. He didn't actually care that his sister was dead, he just loved money. When Francis entered, Rayliana threw her shawl at him and made her escape. Hiding behind a tree, she wanted to live. She was scared. She wished someone would save her. She wanted to go home. She missed her mom, her brother, and her friends. She didn't want to end up following the footsteps of a supporting character who was supposed to die. She pulled herself together, ripping part of her dress to be able to run more easily. She was looking for the road, finally thinking she might have found salvation when a hand came towards her. It was Sir Adam Taylor, who quickly deflected a knife and pointed his blade at Jake's neck. Adam was ready to kill Jake at Rayliana's command. However, Jake was a slippery worm, telling them his younger sister was already dead and his mother lived on a debt-ridden estate, where the debt couldn't be paid off even after selling everything. He was guilt-tripping Rayliana by bringing up that his mother, who never worked, would now have to work for the rest of her life if he died. This distracted them long enough for him to throw a vial that Adam's quick reflexes slashed, summoning a humongous, starved mountain demon. It was a monster that completely obliterated its surroundings once every several hundred years to find food. Adam slashed the monster back, letting Rayliana fall off the cliff behind them. Watching the monster continue to charge towards him, she wanted to tell him to run away, but now her heart was sinking as she wondered if she was going to die again. Opening her eyes though, she found herself in Noah's arms, and he embraced her with feelings of relief. She tried struggling to get out, thinking Adam was in danger, but she'd quickly become stunned, seeing the Grim Reaper had no trouble dispatching the monster effortlessly. Ainsley and the rest of the knights came back with Jake as their prisoner, so Rayliana waved at him, then gestured the thumb across her neck to let him know he was a dead man. The knights then shouted they'd found Francis Brooks, so Rayliana reacted quickly, grabbing the gun out of Noah's holster. She shot at Francis's feet, and now standing above him, he was shrieking in horror. She fired a shot right below his crotch, causing him to wet himself. She felt so much better now, but coming back to her party, they were shocked to see how good she was with a gun. She quickly hid it behind her back, giving them an innocent pose to make it look like she wasn't so scary. She rode back on horse with Noah, and initially didn't want to ride with him, but had no choice since there weren't enough horses, having to deal with his subtle insults of him calling her fat. Saying the horse was moving slower than usual because of her weight. She somehow hated him a little more than Francis in this respect, but managed to squeak out a thank you for saving her, blushing even, falling asleep into his arms. He wondered why he had gotten so angry earlier, having learned she'd been kidnapped. Since she was the only woman who knew his weakness, he technically would have benefited from her death. Still though, he couldn't end this whole ordeal without someone dying, so he ordered Adam to eliminate Jake and Francis quietly. The next morning, with fingers fiddling through her hair and Noah asking if she was awake, she suddenly jolted up, stunned to see he was shirtless. She had no idea why he was like this, or why her back hurt. But trying to remain calm, she asked, "Nothing happened between us, right?" He smugly replied, "Nothing? Did you forget how you held on to me all night?" Causing her to scream internally. She then crawled out of bed, looking back at him teary-eyed, and with her running out of the room, he chased after. Where in front of Adam, Noah commanded him to bring Raeliana, while she commanded him not to. Adam then suddenly picked Raeliana up, choosing to protect Raeliana by escaping, where she was able to relax in the courtyard. She was still stressed, thinking she had slept with Noah, but at the same time, this wasn't even her body. She would later have Adam take her to put on a maid disguise, something she always wanted to try on. After eating some chocolate fondue and bread with her night, she got nervous. Learning Noah had ordered all the servants to go search for her, she decided to hide in Noah's personal study, and attempting to grab one of the books she couldn't reach, a visiting guest helped grab the book for her. She was surprised to see it was Count Keith of Westernburg. He was quite popular in the book as Noah's right-hand man. To actually see him, she felt like she was seeing a celebrity. He was more surprised to learn that some random maid could read the language of Cryptian, and asked if she ever considered going into academia. She then felt a chill run down her spine, hearing, "With you dressed like that, it's no wonder I couldn't find you." It was Noah. Raeliana quickly hid behind a bookcase, telling him not to come near her while calling him a pervert. He cleared things up though, explaining nothing happened between them, and the only reason her back was sore was because she fell asleep while riding the horse, and she held on to him while she slept. He wanted her to sleep comfortably, which is why he had her sleep in his room, because it was the closest to the mansion's entrance. She couldn't believe she was now hearing a genuine apology from him, wondering if this was all a dream. And now, he was grabbing at her hand and pulling it close to his face, only finally letting go once she agreed to forgive him. Running out of the room, flush-faced and heart beating, she couldn't understand what was going on with her. Keith was at a loss for what he had witnessed. Noah had told him his relationship with Raeliana was merely contractual, but from what he just saw, he couldn't help but think Noah might have genuine feelings for her. One morning, Raeliana had woken up to the famous Mary Wayne of the workshop with the same name, presenting the custom-made dress for today, her engagement day. Putting the dress on, she swiveled a bit to test the look, thinking about what had been happening lately. She went to great lengths to avoid Noah this past week, and during that time, her family visited the Wynknight mansion. After hearing about her kidnapping, Noah told them that Frances Brooks was jailed at the St. Bell High Security Prison, putting everyone's minds at ease. With Frances locked in a prison people never escaped from, she was safe from danger now. She wondered if there was any reason for them to continue their engagement. He later took her on a rowboat date on the Siam Kane River, where fireworks were being shot over. He knew she had no reason to be with him anymore, but suddenly told her, "Stay by my side until I really am no longer of use to you." She responded, "Yes, of course," wondering if there was more to that. She then asked him if he's ever loved someone, but he hasn't. Since being a royal duke, falling in love was a risk. She was suddenly distracted, seeing a blonde-haired figure walking through a crowd of people. Could that have been the protagonist, Beatrice? Raeliana would later read a letter from Price that spoke on various things. The two most notable were Ray being invited to the secret wives gatherings, and that because of the monster attack that happened to her earlier, the monster subjugation event was now being moved up sooner. From the novel, Eunha remembered that every late fall, the kingdom prepared for the winter by holding a monster culling event for 3 days at the Cycret mountain range. The event lessened the amount of monsters coming down from the mountain looking for food when it was scarce, held as a national protective measure. The participants of the monster subjugation were nobles from all ranks who were known for their combat prowess, and these nobles offered their slain monsters to a lady. The lady with the most slain monsters light the torch in the temple, and in recent years, Vivian had been lighting the torch. Raeliana was then surprised to find the letter she sent Beatrice returned to her. She noted Beatrice to have radiant blonde hair that flowed around the waist. She was a beautiful woman with a lovely smile, the female lead. Raeliana didn't plan on taking over, and sent the letter so that Beatrice could return without changing the story too much. In the original story, the two girls were best friends, and had quite long interactions before Beatrice went to attend International Piart School for Theology. Raeliana later decided to visit Noah, finding him asleep, probably resting because he's been busy, leading to the upcoming subjugation. With it being the first time she's seen him like this, she wished his personality matched his handsome face. She felt, as the male lead, it'd only be natural he ended up with the female protagonist. With Beatrice Transet, they misunderstood each other at first, but eventually develop a strange fondness. Everything changes when they meet in the middle of the market, in the royal garden, on top of a tower. That's where he falls in love with her. Noah slowly wakes up, uttering Rayliana's name, and now she was wondering what to say. "You looked so handsome while you were sleeping." "No way! She'd die from embarrassment." He suddenly grabbed her face, asking if she was ill, since her face was red, then began to pinch her cheek. "You shouldn't look at a sleeping person like that," he said, teasing like usual. With her apologizing over and over, he finally let go, so she stormed off to her room to start beating her pillow while thinking of him. Thinking of how cute she was earlier, he didn't think this was too bad at all. Heading out for the subjugation event, a letter arrived from Piart's School for Theology, responding to Rayliana's letter that the student she was looking for, Beatrice Transet, was not enrolled at their school. Rayliana didn't understand what was going on. Did she return home or go somewhere else? She was concerned the plot was changing because of what she'd done. At the event, many noble women were swarming Noah, likely not caring he had a fiancée at all. They were still on the offensive. Dame Ansley gave her pledge to Rayliana for her hunt, taking a piece of Rayliana's outfit to tie on herself for good luck. Rayliana thought Ansley was so cool. Noah then came by, asking if she forgot something. Per tradition, noble women were to give a handkerchief they knitted for the night they wanted to be most successful during the hunt. However, she only prepared one for Sir Adam, and had no intention of giving her unbeloved fiancé Noah one. Hearing he didn't take them anyway, he took hers, claiming today he would. She didn't understand his deal, but let it go. He then got off his horse, kneeling before her to give her hand a kiss, and she sighed over the show he was putting on, and handed him a spare cloth with reluctance. Then she handed Adam the cloth she made for him, and he was shocked looking at it, wondering if she wanted him to slay a dragon for her. Looking over now, Rayliana could see Vivian and her cronies, Stephanie Carlisle and Christine Barkley, the three who harassed Beatrice in the original story, but paid them no mind so she could see Noah off. Inside the estate, Vivian and her goons forced Ray to sit beside her. She really didn't want to, and had to hear them glaze Vivian for receiving 3 high-level monsters during the last event. Rayliana even played into Vivian's ego, hoping to be spared from any annoying villainous aggression. But Vivian couldn't help but act like a witch. Replace the W with a because she had to bring up how Duke Wynknight has never offered his slain monsters to anyone before. Rayliana was reasonably irritated, so she of course clapped back, saying she was fully content with the fact Noah accepted her handkerchief, knowing he's never accepted anyone else's before. This made Vivian clench her teeth, perfect for Rayliana to capitalize on, by asking if she happened to eat a rock, and telling her that rocks were not good for the teeth, asking her to spit it out. Vivian had to deal with the other ladies laughing at her, and she certainly didn't like that. Meanwhile, all the hunters were slaying monsters left and right. Ansley wanted to go back so badly because it was a one-sided slaughter, with Adam and Noah killing everything in sight to complete. They even decided to smear themselves with monster blood and spend the night here to potentially attract higher-level monsters. Ansley was strong, but she couldn't compete with these monstrous men. Rayliana would suddenly get wine splashed on her by Stephanie, and she'd diss the crony, telling her she should have known her vision was as narrow as her knowledge. Ray left taking the high ground, with Stephanie steaming in anger. Eventually, the hunters came back with their offerings, and Vivian received multiple beasts, hoping to earn Rayliana's envy. But she ignored Vivian completely, wondering why Noah's party hadn't returned yet. She was worried about them. Eventually, they heard the intimidating screech of a beast, and Ansley arrived panting. Rayliana asked her what was going on, and all Ansley replied was, "Hell," before passing out. Then, another woman screamed, shrieking that she saw the mountain move on its own. Everyone was shocked, seeing what she was seeing. Noah was smugged, disappointed he couldn't bring Rayliana back a dragon. So, he hoped this humongous beast that had never been killed before would suffice. She couldn't believe he was talking about monsters, as if he bought fried chicken instead of pizza. Seeing Vivian's annoyed face, Rayliana took advantage of the situation, suddenly grabbing Noah's face in front of her and acting flirty. He'd return a bit of this back, making her repulse on the inside. And with Vivian distraught now, Rayliana had to leave off with a victory wink. Alone in the room together, Noah suddenly told Rayliana he was going to change clothes, and she tried to escape. She was nervous, hoping he'd restrain his indecent desires for the sake of her eyes and brain. But he couldn't let her off peacefully without teasing that she was into peeping, bringing up the time she watched him sleep. She then covered his mouth, asking why he was bringing that up, saying she did not peep, and that wasn't anything strange at all, and that he also peeped on her too, watching her sleep in bed. He followed that up by making it worse, reminding her of that time she fell asleep on the horse and cried her eyes out, thinking he'd taken advantage of her body like it was the end of the world. So she shoved at his mouth again. Her eyes were dizzy and distraught. She couldn't stop babbling in defense of herself. He eventually gave in, so she decided to step out and let him rest. But outside, she stared at her hand, wondering when she got comfortable enough to put her hands on him. Watching Ray take her leave, Keith entered Noah's room, bringing up that this was the first time ever that Noah had brought back a monster. And as a close friend, he wanted to know if Noah had genuine feelings for Raeliana. Hearing Noah reply no, he asked if it was fine for him to approach Raeliana romantically. This made Noah cold. He warned Keith not to cross the line. A bisque doll with golden eyes. A beautiful woman who bears a pale pink rose fragrance. Behind her red lips shined teeth like 30-carat diamonds. She wore lace stockings that slightly revealed her pale thighs, captivating all men, and believed everyone belonged to her. She knew the idea sounded ridiculous, but she had everything and could get whatever she wanted until she met Duke Wynknight. The only reason she accepted the king's marriage proposal was to make Noah realize how it felt to lose her. That's when that woman offered to give Vivian what she wanted, and gave Vivian the jewel that would help her. Raeliana would later spot that jewel in her room. She didn't remember packing it in her luggage, but took it with her anyway. At the temple, priest Wade Davis had to deal with Master Heike DeMint, not wanting to deal with the petty nobles coming to light the fire with the woman chosen from the monster subjugation. Wade was pleading with Heike, since this time's guests were high-ranking nobles from the kingdom of Chammers. He reminded Heike that they needed the nobles' backings because their financial situation was becoming increasingly worse. Their donations had lessened because of a rumor that they were a terrible organization, and the businesses within the religious order weren't doing well in general. High Priest Heike was a scholar who compiled theology, a legendary figure who changed all previous paradigms. Wade knew a tremendous amount of donations would be given if he just showed his face. There were even those who'd give up all their possessions to receive His Holiness's touch just once. There's even a king who's willing to donate his whole kingdom. Still though, Heike didn't care, even dissing Wade for not being smart enough to read the ancient text. Wade tried to defend himself by saying he ranked highly as a graduate from Piart's School of Theology, but this only made Heike think theology schools accepted any blockhead these days. Eventually though, Wade was able to convince old man Heike to show himself to the nobles, in hopes they'd receive an ample donation that would allow them to run the temple for years. Outside of the temple, Raeliana thought about how she just wanted to run away. She was initially greeted by Priestess Eugenia, and from then on, Raeliana would suffer having rice gruel for breakfast, then a purification shower, rice gruel for lunch, then a purification shower, and rice gruel for dinner, then a purification shower. And the rice gruel was disgusting, and Eugenia refused to explain what it was made out of. Ray supposedly had to eat it to remove the toxins from her body. She then spotted a bird about to drown, and going to save it, Heike watched her from a tree branch, thinking she was so foolish, since whether the bird died by drowning or in the dome, it was all the same. He was at a loss, seeing her shaking the bird up and down, trying to get it cough up the water. He then approached her, explaining that Bejos could only fly in low temperatures. The grown ones avoided this warm dome altogether, but since young ones like this bird couldn't fly very well, they crashed into this place and died soon after. Seeing her ask for confirmation, he thought she'd at least frown. Humans who visited the temple were prideful, impressionable, and naive. They usually get sad in a situation like this. He wondered if she just didn't understand. He warned her sending it outside the dome wouldn't help either, since the young weren't able to endure the intense temperature. But he was surprised again, seeing her completely ignore him because she had no idea who he was. She tried to help the bird fly off, but with it falling to the ground, Heike called her foolish, saying it was fated to die the moment it entered the dome. Fate struck a nerve with her, and she turned towards him, grabbing his cheeks while telling him he was a really mean kid. She believed it didn't matter if one was fated to die, because if they had the will to live, they'd live. He couldn't believe he was treated like a boy, given he was a living religious legend. But she just saw him as a cute little kid, like her sister. Suddenly, the two spotted the bird take flight, and Raeliana walked away victoriously, telling him he shouldn't be so quick to give up. Back inside, she tried her best to look for a way to escape, but would have no luck, getting quickly caught by Eugenia. Elsewhere though, Heike was calling Wade a useless turd for being unable to find the junior priestess as depicted in his terrible drawing. Heike was insistent on teaching her exactly who he was. He wanted to let that brat know how superior he was, and couldn't sleep comfortably until he did so. In Raeliana's purification bath, she only had thoughts about how she could avoid eating gruel for lunch. She begged Eugenia to give her leniency, so the priestess allowed Ray to go to the library and copy the scripture instead. Raeliana was glowing with happiness, accepting the task, and inside, she happily got to work. After the work was finished, Heike would later return, pissed, to find someone had touched his scripture work. Wade thought it was strange, considering no one else could read the language except for Heike. He was stunned to hear the high priest say it was perfect. While the vocabulary used was a bit lacking, the sentences read very smoothly. Heike knew if he polished up this person's talent a bit, he'd reap an enormous harvest. He demanded Wade to find this person immediately. And so, Wade used a magic butterfly tracker, and Heike found Raeliana. He had first referred to her as the barbarian, and asked if she perhaps spoke in God's tongue, using the language himself. She responded back in the same language, asking him if that was a way to speak to adults, and he was completely shocked. God's tongue was a special language that could only be used within the temple, and it was very rare to find someone who could speak it fluently at such a young age. Like Raeliana, he started hounding her with more questions, and when Wade appeared huffing and breathless, Heike adamantly declared that Raeliana was the disciple he'd been looking for. Ray didn't understand, and Wade now had another headache to deal with. She couldn't believe this boy was Heike de Mint, the high priest. Wade added that Heike was currently sealing his divine power, which is why he took on this form. She started to sob. She didn't want to stay here and translate words she didn't know underneath this arrogant child, and Heike was shocked that she declined his offer and quickly left them. Heike would later visit Wade at the crack of dawn, trying to get insight on why Raeliana declined his offer. And hearing Wade say maybe she felt overwhelmed and just needed a sense of familiarity, Heike decided to call for the opening of the gate to the Holy Kingdom. Getting ready for the torch-lighting ceremony, a maid presented Raeliana with a special jewel that Vivian snuck into her room. She had a strange feeling about it, but let the maid put it on her anyway. The Holy Knight stood shining against the light behind his holiness, High Priest Heike de Mint. Raeliana thought it was so bright. Surely he didn't just call the Holy Knights to do this, right? Heike stared back at her, and seeing how unimpressed she was, he thought about Wade's advice of creating a sense of familiarity. For 150 years, he's lived a single-minded lifestyle with no friends or family. He remembered chatting with another associate at the Holy Kingdom Presbytery. The man at 80 years old had a newborn granddaughter he loved to dote over. And so, he declared that he would become Raeliana's grandfather, and urged her to call him that immediately. Getting a little too anxious from all this, Raeliana decided to take her leave to the restroom. And that's when Heike noticed the jewel resonating on her head. As it began to crack, Noah came to her side, and Heike disarmed it before it could explode. And now, in his true form, he asked her again if she'd call him grandfather. He explained that the green jewel was made of crystalline stone, a mineral found in the Holy Kingdom. Its import was strictly limited, and although beautiful, when heated by light, it could only absorb so much before it exploded. Now seeing Noah, Heike perceived the Duke to have eyes no different than a wild beast. In his 150 years of life, guys like Noah always turned out to be far too insidious. He did not improve of him. He asked Noah what he was to his Raeliana. And learning Noah was her fiancé, Heike saw him as a hindrance that would get in the way of developing her linguistic talent. He demanded Noah to break up with Raeliana. The two started going back and forth at each other until Wade was able to pull Noah away so the temple could receive patronage on behalf of House Wynknight. Raeliana was still shaking that evening during her bath, thinking if it had been caught any later, she would have died. Was a mere supporting character like Raeliana Macmillan fated to die? She tried to get herself to stop thinking about it. Reasoning negative thoughts attracted negative things. Then suddenly, The lights turned off, and she got startled by Noah. He broke the news that both Francis Brooks and Jake Langston had been killed, and she was shocked and angry, now figuring their imprisonment at St. Bell was a lie. But he didn't care about that, or even what she did for someone to still be making attempts on her life. What he wanted to know was who was after her. She had no idea, and told him they should just talk tomorrow. But he grabbed her arm, wanting to talk now. He wouldn't allow any situations he couldn't take control of. This made her pissed, and she threw him in the water. She told him to cool his head. This was the purification room. Only those with permission were allowed to enter. He couldn't believe he was losing control of himself, and started thinking back to Keith asking if he had feelings for her. He suddenly came to her shoulder, admitting he was so mad because the thought of losing her was driving him crazy. She didn't know how to take this, and didn't know what he meant by that. The next day, she chose not to look at him, because whatever she was thinking of had to be delusion or just a misunderstanding. Looking at the statue of the goddess, she felt familiarity in it, but couldn't quite put her finger on why. Heika placed his hand on her head for the torch lighting ceremony, and finally convinced her to call him grandfather, begrudgingly of course, and thus she was able to light the torch. Wade had to hold the priest back, who was trying to leave the temple to continue following his granddaughter, and Ray was truly thankful for Wade's sacrifice. At home, the eldest son of the Shammo house, Justin, was being scolded by his father for wandering around because of a woman. Justin assured his father that his trips had nothing to do with her and took his leave. He went to go see his sister, who was throwing a fit over the failed event that happened to Rayliana. And that's when their smiling guest greeted them, Beatrice Transet. Rayliana continued to ponder on who wanted her dead. After talking with Noah, she thought perhaps this was the revenge of someone who held a grudge against him, but now she wasn't certain. Seeing Noah training, she remembered the original novel describing him as a man who would rather wield a sword than a pen. However, he was always buried in documents because he's helping the king. She asked to learn the art of the sword from him, but he didn't want her to ruin her hands. So, he showed her a way to attack by gathering chi, firing a blast, and cracking the ground from a distance. But of course, there's no way an ordinary person could do this. He would later take Rayliana to the jewel shop, where they subtly quipped back and forth with each other, and he was teasingly blaming her for not being careful with her jewelry choices. Rayliana nervously replied that all the jewels were so pretty, which Noah thought was perfect, because he was going to buy the whole store out. All the jewels were thus sent to the mansion, save for the one he wanted to place around her neck. Ray tried to not make a big deal out of it, but she was gushing. They made a stop by the bookstore, where the clerk asked Ray if she still hadn't broken up with her boyfriend yet. Oh my gosh, he was there when she bought the Idiot's Guide to Breakups. She could already hear Noah thinking she wouldn't dare, and he told the clerk he was very clingy, and asked the clerk to stop her if she ever wanted help breaking up with him in the future. Back at the Wynknight estate, Rayliana heard from her personal maid, Haley, of a particular room that housed all possessions owned by the previous Duke Wynknight. There was a rumored mirror inside, said to contain a trapped spirit that only came out when one looked at it alone. And it apparently told you anything you wanted to know. That night, Rayliana was spooked, but curious. She wanted to ask it where Beatrice was right now. Looking, she noticed blue eyes in the reflection. Then, someone touched her back, causing her to get startled and drop the mirror where it shattered. It was Noah. She wanted to know why he was here, considering he said he had to go on a trip for business. And now she figured he was worried about her. But he assured her he just left something behind. He could tell she was scared by the way she was grabbing at his jacket, and decided to escort her back to her room. She was even willing to hold his hand on the way back. And even having heard what he said about leaving something behind, she could tell he was worried for her, but decided to pretend she didn't know that. Sitting at her bedside, waiting for her to fall asleep, he happened to pick up a romance novel she already finished reading. She was excited to hear what he thought, but it'd be a letdown, since he thought too many things happened by chance, and the romance was really out of touch with reality. She couldn't help but click her tongue a bit, since he was also the protagonist of a romance novel, telling him what kind of romance could possibly unfold if the story followed the logic of reality. Just how many hearts would that flutter? She eventually fell asleep, grabbing onto him, and staring at her beautiful face, he fell back. He was losing his mind. At the palace, Count Naomi O'Brien was dragging the sheets off, exposing a blue-haired woman and King Seatric Nuriel Chalmers, Noah's half-brother. Naomi wanted to quit her job real bad, but did it well, kicking Sia's woman of the night out. While she dressed Sia, He made small talk about how he heard his cute little brother had gotten a fiancée. Sitting down with Noah and Keith, Sia proposed a toast. Tomorrow, the legislative session would be over, and the hidden royal seal would finally be revealed. Even if the rejected bill were to get received, it would be impossible to reintroduce in several years. Within that time, he was going to help the nouveau riche grow in power to rival the old nobles. It took a while, but he was finally able to overcome this small obstacle. Sia then wanted to hear about Noah's fiancée, and so Noah explained everything that led up to their engagement, including her blackmailing him about the royal seal. Logically, Sia suggested Noah break up with her once this whole ordeal was over, but everyone in the room was shocked to hear he wasn't going to do that, since she still had things to do as his fiancée. On another day, Ray would receive a letter from the Holy Kingdom. It was from Heika and read, "Raeliana, this is your grandfather. I couldn't sleep well after you left. I've created a position for you at the temple. It is an honor, but there is no need to be timid. Let's go sightseeing when you come to the Holy Kingdom. There's a 165 feet bronze statue of me you can see from afar." Raeliana put the letter back in the envelope and quickly tossed it into the fire, telling her maid it was a chain letter that was filled with misfortune. She suddenly remembered the legislative session was over because of the newspaper and bolted off on horseback to the cemetery where the royal seal was being kept, because according to the novel, Beatrice should appear there on this day. In the novel, Robert Wynknight, who was supposed to become Duke instead of Noah, was killed in an accident. His widowed wife left the title to Noah, her maternal nephew, second in line to the throne, and then passed away. Making it to the gravesite, she came across Justin instead of the person she was hoping to see. Being gentlemanlike, he took off his jacket and offered her a place to sit, even pulling out a drink for her. He had come back here after a long time to visit his friend Robert's grave, but now found it had disappeared. He originally brought this bottle to drink with him, but learned there was a grave robbery earlier from the gravekeeper, so the entire cemetery was moved into the Wynknight estate. Raeliana knew that never happened in the novel, and wondered if Noah moved the cemetery as an excuse to change the royal seal's location. Raeliana didn't know who this man was, but chatting together, she felt like she'd known him for a long time now. She began to fixate on Beatrice being here, and how she had stopped her and Noah from meeting and falling in love. She felt guilty in a way. Justin cheered her up, guessing her situation in a close enough way, and told her it wasn't her fault that the two people she wanted to get together weren't meeting. That's just how things were supposed to play out. She found him to be quite interesting. The man in front of her possessed such handsome features, but she couldn't recall who he was. After she took off, Justin realized he forgot to ask what her name was, thinking she was quite a beauty. But then, thought it didn't matter, since they probably wouldn't meet again. Raeliana came home sick, a little depressed, and a little drunk, so Noah carried her to bed. She thought it was strange that he was being nice to her, and before he could leave her side, she'd admit he was on her mind a lot more these days, and now he was wide-eyed. He grabbed her face, offering to help her get rid of her cold, telling her it'd go away if she gave it to someone else. And with her passing out from exhaustion, he put his lips on hers. Keith was shaking, hearing Sia wanted to meet Raeliana, and he was not excited knowing he'd have to deal with Noah to get to her. The next day, Raeliana felt a lot better sooner than she thought she would. She felt something was off with Noah, and seeing him sneeze, he definitely had a cold. Of course, she was better now, because he took hers. I don't think it works that way. Keith would later visit Ray, escorting her somewhere with the excuse the Duke wanted to see her. On the ride there, she asked to touch his hair, since she'd never seen blue hair before, and he let her. At the palace, she gasped, getting trapped in the room with King Sia. She bowed before him, but he assured her it was fine. He was just curious about her, since his little brother refused to show her off. The two played a game of Go, since Sia was fond of board games. She discussed diplomacy with him, and revealed some important information from the novel that would help him. And suddenly beating him at the game, he was a sore loser because he's never lost a game in his life. And as king, declared she'd teach him how to play better until he won. Now she could tell he and Noah were definitely brothers. He ended up keeping Raeliana at the palace for a while, and commanded Count O'Brien to inform Noah. For her troubles, he gave Raeliana a pass only nobles in Parliament could get. She wondered if it was really okay for her to have. Being forced to spend time with Sia, she described him as 50% a wise king, but unfortunately, 40% of him liked to joke around, and the remaining 10% was just lust. He walked around with a cane, since one of his legs was disabled. He had a royal concubine even before his soon-to-be lawful queen, Vivian Shamel. Her name was Soroso, Marquess Eretiel's younger sister. House Eretiel was one of the most powerful families in the kingdom. Perhaps to keep their expanding influence in check, people started spreading disturbing rumors that she was seeing a black witch. Because of this, Soroso was unable to become queen. However, she gave birth to Sia's son. That son is currently the kingdom's first prince, Seymour Chalmers. Marquess Eretiel had planned to grow his influence to make his nephew Seymour king. However, his wife Price was naive and easy to trick. What Noah wanted Raeliana to learn from her was which house Price had been meeting with that was helping Marquess Eretiel. But Raeliana already knew it was House Larkin because of her novel knowledge. She couldn't just tell him right away though. She had to pretend to discover it after attending several meetings. And once he got this info from her, their bizarre engagement would come to an end. Noah felt exhausted these 4 days being away from Ray. At the palace, she let off a big smile where the two saw each other in passing. She would gesture to him to come get her soon, and he surprised his escort because he was actually smiling just thinking about her. At Sia's rose garden, he would summon his hawk, and Raeliana was excited to pet him. He would soon tell her there was no need to worry, because soon her engagement with Noah would end. He turned his back, looking towards her, and really did resemble Noah in this moment. He thought it was too bad though, since his little brother really seemed to have fallen head over heels for her. But either way, he offered her to come work for him once her engagement was off. She was fixated, thinking about how she might have to marry for the convenience of her house like other daughters, to someone other than Noah. She was surprised, coming across one of Noah's knights, Wheaton, in disguise. He received orders from Noah to bring her back to the mansion. Escorting her out, they came across the only other person who had a squad of attendants other than Sia, the first concubine, Soroso Dwin Chalmers. Raeliana was forced to go to Soroso's palace, where she had to listen to roughly 10 high-profile noblewomen subtly that she, a nouveau riche woman, had made it to their place of high society. She had to deal with them for hours and hours. She snuck out the next night with the help of Wheaton, and climbing off her balcony, she fell into the arms of Justin Schammel. He offered a drink with her, and was a little quizzical, thinking about her being a maid who had an arranged marriage. Eventually, we get to the secret wives meeting, where Price points out who Ray was looking for, Countess Chloe Larkin. The Countess was from a declining family and joined the Larkins as the second wife. Rumor had it she was in love with another man, but left him in pursuit of power. And now, the Count had another mistress. Raeliana later attended a masquerade ball, where Chloe would be, but got stopped by Justin, who pointed out that before, she was a maid attempting to escape the castle, and now, a noble lady invited to a secret soiree. The two were interrupted by Chloe, his ex. He suddenly told her he was in love with another woman, and with Ray getting pulled in, she panicked internally, wondering if he meant her. Chloe's eyes started to well up with tears, making him anxious. Ray could tell he's probably given in like this many times. So, she decided to help him out by taking him away. In the back, he explained his past with Chloe, who used him as a stepping stone into high society. Ray told him he should find someone else, because he was too young to mope around over one person. She took her leave, not telling her name, but now knowing exactly who he was. He hoped to meet her again, but she replied they only would if they were meant to. But with him having stolen her engagement ring, he had a feeling they'd meet again sooner than she'd think. The next day, Raeliana issued a challenge that Sia accepted. She was put into a disguise to attend a costume ball, and her condition for winning was Noah finding her. If she won, she'd be allowed to go home. However, she was not allowed to speak or approach him. He joked that if Noah really loved her, he'd figure out who she was with no issue. It was crowded, and she eventually bumped into him. He knew it was her immediately, and this got her heart beating. Then, the king called for some entertainment. He would grant a special reward to whomever brought him the lady wearing the butterfly mask by midnight, and pointed at Raeliana. Noah acted quickly, grabbing her and running away in response. 10 more minutes to midnight. Raeliana laughed at Noah being so out of it because of his brother. Their hiding spot was a place Sia had taken him to all the time, when they were kids. She imagined Noah was a two-faced kid that grown-ups loved for being well-behaved. Meanwhile, he was actually mean and sly around his peers, and had no friends. And actually, she was right. He was quiet, and only Sia would spend time with him. So the saddest day of his life was when he could no longer go to the spot with Sia. His mother was always depressed, but she put on a beautiful smile for the first time. When Sia drank poison, that was the day he decided to make Sia king. She consoled Noah, telling him it wasn't his fault. Then suddenly, as the midnight bell tolled, she felt a familiar feeling as she quickly collapsed. Adam was finally returning from his mission. 2 weeks ago, he was shown the maid who put the crystalline jewel on Raeliana hanging from the ceiling. She did not kill herself, but they made it look that way. He could tell this was definitely the work of a hitman. Justin Schammel, the Royal Guard's 1st Division commander, met with King Sia. He'd been gone from the palace for a while, having taken Sia's advice to deal with his heartbreak. Sia was shocked to hear Justin was in love with another person who was already engaged. But hearing the woman in question was in an arranged marriage, he just told Justin to get her to call it off and be more selfish. Eunha thought back to getting shoved off of the roof of the library in her old life. She woke up, body feeling heavy, and Noah asleep by her side. She was glad to see him. He woke up, mouth agape, a distraught look in his eyes, and tried handing her some water. But she dropped it from weakness, where he caught it with fast reflexes. He then poured it into his mouth and made her drink with a kiss. She couldn't believe this, but he wouldn't explain. Instead, just kissing her again. When she had passed out, Noah called for many priests to come heal her, only to see no progress. The priests said they felt their energy drain out, like water in a bottomless pit. Eventually, Heika entered the scene. One of the butlers, Lloyd, entered in on the interesting scene between Ray and Noah, and decided to try stepping out. Ray tried to recount the events that led up to this point, flushed, thinking about the kiss between her and Noah. Heika was frustrated with Noah, thinking he pushed Raeliana to the point of exhaustion. The two went back and forth, arguing like cats and dogs. She learned she'd been knocked out for 10 days, and touching her lip, she screamed into her pillow. She reasoned she wasn't thinking straight earlier, and should have pushed Noah away. Now she knew for sure Noah liked her. But this was a problem. Noah was supposed to meet and fall in love with Beatrice. Would he still love her after meeting the heroine? Ray liked Noah, but was anxious, thinking fate could still be coming for her life. She didn't want him enough to overcome this fear she had. Taking a walk that night, she was met by Adam, who checked on her by twisting her around. She thought this was some kind of Alsace custom and tried to dance with him, but she was totally off. Finding Noah, she shot straight, asking if he liked her. Instead of answering, he just looked at her, then looked away, and took her hand to give it a kiss, causing her to blush. She then covered his mouth, telling him, nope, never mind. She didn't want an answer. She was thinking he was too good looking, and she'd be head over heels for him if he said he liked her. She couldn't put her future on hold on a whim, and told him the Larkin family were the ones speaking with House Eretil. Then said they should terminate their engagement contract now. But he wasn't going to let her go, especially since their contract hadn't expired yet, and was now begging her to give him a chance. Wade found Heika giving a creepy smile. His holiness was certainly enjoying himself, having watched Noah embarrass himself from afar. Thinking to himself, Raeliana had woken up fine, without showing any side effects. But he sensed traces of witchcraft in her. He met with her privately the next day, where he was adamant that she call him Grandpa. He wanted to know what her deal was. Nothing worked on her, be it blessings or divine power. Her body couldn't absorb any divine power either. It felt as if her soul refused its body. So, she finally admitted she wasn't from this world. She never thought she'd be telling her secret to another person, and knew the idea sounded like nonsense. He then spoke on this phenomenon. The old order believed that the goddess recorded every soul in a book. Then came the new religious order, and people stopped believing in it. Few people today knew much about the old order, but he read many texts from the period to establish new order theology. Every soul was recorded in a book. Led by the goddess, the soul takes a journey around the world until it perished. This was the belief of the old church. He suspected she remembered her previous life as Eunha because of an error during the transitional period. It wasn't normal for one to remember 2 of their lifetimes at once. According to this hypothesis, Raeliana's original soul perished, and Eunha from another world came in, inheriting her memories and body. He tried to console her, feeling bad she had to deal with this all alone. Noah suddenly entered, picking Raeliana up and swooping her away, telling Heika a simple goodbye, and she covered her face fully red while he continued to princess carry her. After having him put her down, she told him to stop picking her up and putting on public displays. He told her no, since he was her fiancé, and that she wasn't allowed to hug other men in front of him. He placed his jacket on her, since it was cold, but she just left him behind, heading to the night market where Heika wanted to spend time with her. But he'd find a way to tag along with Adam, much to Heika's dismay. She should have known she couldn't get away from him. She schmoozed Heika up, calling him Grandpa. That way, he wouldn't accidentally transform into his true form here, where everyone would want to chat with him if they found out he was the high priest. They enjoyed the night market together, and Raeliana was surprised to hear this was his first time out, since he was rarely allowed to leave the temple. Coming across a booth with a teddy bear Ray wanted. She had to win it by shooting 50 shots in the bullseye. She won with ease, despite the bullseye being much smaller than it appeared, and all the guns being hand-picked with the worst calibrations. A man started shouting at Raeliana, harassing her for being a woman shooting guns, when women were supposed to be cooking and watching the kids at home. Noah wasn't going to let him ruin the fun, and threatened him, causing the man to fall to the ground. He slyly shushed the man, and all was resolved. Ray eventually won the bear, and just look at how cute this panel is. With Raeliana enjoying more of the festival, Noah thought she was absolutely adorable. He was so distracted, he bumped into Beatrice, and seeing her face, he thought of her as seemingly strangely distant. Things were not all joyful at the night market. Heike told Raeliana her body hasn't fully recovered. They needed to find a way to integrate her soul into her body. Otherwise, she could fall unconscious again at any moment. If it happened again, there was no guarantee she'd wake up. Once he returned from his trip, Heike was going to look into a solution at Betrothed Temple, the New Order's headquarters. Still, there was a bigger problem. She didn't have any memories of Raeliana before she entered her body. Perceiving traces of witchcraft within her, he suspected something must have happened in Raeliana's past involving the Black Witch. He reassured her things would be fine, handing her a bell that carried his divine power, believing it should help a bit. Seeing her off the next day, he gave her a kiss on the forehead, telling her, "May the favor of the goddess be with you always." She did the same for him on the cheek, definitely irritating Noah. And after Heike left, Noah felt like he had to rub it off before walking away and leaving her jaw dropped. Raeliana spent the next morning looking for her engagement ring. Outside her room, Noah came, dazzling in her eyes, asking what was wrong. And with her heart beating, she had to remind herself he wasn't her man and that he'd end up with someone else. The engagement ring was certainly pricey. She'd probably have to sell the family mine to pay for its loss. She was going to look for it at the royal palace. And even though Adam was trying to comfort her, she just told him she was such a mess and wanted to dig a hole and bury herself in it. Remembering he was raised in war-torn burials, she apologized for saying that in front of him. But what if the ring seriously wasn't in the palace? And Justin would show her he had the ring for some reason. She was so relieved. She thought she was going to ruin her whole family and would have to work to pay off that debt for the rest of her life. Justin was good-looking, kind, and warm. She thought he was perfect, until he told her he wasn't giving it back for free. He at first tried to coerce her into having dinner with him, then being his pretend girlfriend, but she rejected both of these things. And then finally revealing her name to him, he now knew she was Duke Wynknight's fiancée, and had a complete misunderstanding that Noah was in love with another woman, but engaged to her through reasons she couldn't explain to him at the moment. She was fine not getting the ring back. As Noah's fiancée still, she refused to be unfaithful. So he settled on just being friends with her, and that was enough to make him happy. Nathan barged into the room, asking why he did that. He hit on Raeliana Macmillan, an engaged woman. What if he went through another devastating breakup and moped around again? Returning that evening, Noah decided to take her on a walk. She couldn't help but think he spent time with her because he liked her. She told him she wanted to go home and see her parents, since it had been a long time. Really though, she wanted to hopefully find some clues there about why she had none of Raeliana's memories prior to taking her body. Noah then asked, what if he said no? She answered she'd run away. So he asked, what if he caught her? And she called that obsession. For him, that was an easy choice. He told her he didn't want her to leave. She suddenly ran off from him, and he just thought about how flustered her face was, and assumed she might feel the same way about him. Finally back at the Macmillan home, Raeliana spent some loving time with her mother. She'd later get her ear talked off by the housemaids, who wanted to know how things were at the Duke's mansion. She would strike fear in their hearts, saying House Wynknight had monsters, one gray, one black, and they were so wild, they sometimes thought of hunting dragons. The only maid Raeliana really wanted to speak to was Venia, the one who'd been attending to her entire life, and learned from Venia that Raeliana left the house very often, and had kept that fact a secret from her family. Many had just assumed when Duke Wynknight came into the picture that she'd been seeing him the entire time. She later went to the place in front of the produce market, where Raeliana got dropped off for these secret leavings. The man who ran their family stables pointed towards a creepy alley that she always seemed to enter. Making her way through, she was directed by a homeless man who recognized her. He told her she'd usually go to the fortune teller's place, who worked at the square. Then suddenly, Justin appeared, not expecting to meet her here. He spotted some serious thugs looking at her, and decided to intervene before something happened, offering to drop her off at her destination so she could remain safe. With her heading to the psychic's building, Wheaton came out from the shadows, asking Justin to identify himself. And now that Justin realized Wheaton was a part of Noah's guards, he introduced himself as Raeliana's secret lover. But that was just a joke. Wheaton ended up retreating to a distance, and now Justin only had more questions. Unfortunately, Raeliana would turn up another dead end. Learning the fortune teller killed herself from the surrounding neighbors, Raeliana pieced together that the fortune teller had predicted Soroso would have a child with King Sia, which is how Soroso had rumors spread of her that she was associated with a black witch. She surmised that someone killed the fortune teller and made it look like a self-kill as a cover-up. But still, this did not answer why the original Raeliana visited the fortune teller. Eventually, the Macmillans threw a house party, and Noah made a sudden entrance. He's really missed her, even though it had only been 3 days. Riding back to his mansion, she fell asleep on his lap, and waking up sometime later, she jolted up, started grabbing at his pants, hoping to wipe off any drool she might have left. But he told her to stop, otherwise she'd feel embarrassed later. And staring at her hands and where she was touching, she couldn't help but squeal out of embarrassment. Raeliana rummaged for books through the Wynknight Estate library, looking for anything about the Old Order that could help inform her about what happened to the real Raeliana. Noah explained the Royal Library might be a good place, but only royal family members or those with special permission were allowed to enter. He flashed his pass, only allowing her to borrow it if she joined him for dinner at their restaurant in the city center. The extravagant Tratavia, where people needed to waitlist for at least 6 months. But not Noah, of course. She accepted and took the pass. At the library, while being directed towards the books of the Old Order, she spotted Count Bennett. In the novel, he got caught trying to kill King Sia, but she felt like she was forgetting something else that was important about him. He knocked out the prince's guard and bribed the nurse to leave. He then stared at Prince Seymour with a darkened face. When Count Bennett was young, he accidentally killed a hunting dog's puppy, when he actually intended to kill the grown dog for not listening to him. But because he lacked the strength then, he just watched the dog grieve for its baby. He was surprised, because Raeliana smacked his head, grabbing Seymour in her arms, because she remembered in the novel, he was choked to death as an infant, and Bennett was the suspect. She ran as fast as she could, making it to another room and hiding. Nathan, meanwhile, who was guarding the entrance to the library, informed Justin that Raeliana was here, and he jolted up to go find her. Hiding desperately with little Seymour in her arms, she narrowly evaded a fatal strike through the closet. But luckily, the Count was just guessing and couldn't tell she was in it. Then, with her staring at the baby, he began to cry. As the Count opened the closet, she shoved the door into him and ran off again, desperately looking for a gun. As his hand reached closer and closer, all she could think of was how scared she was. She just wanted Noah to come save her. She suddenly fell into Noah's arms, and as he drew his blade, he covered her eyes and cut the Count down. She had to explain she somehow found the prince in danger by total coincidence, so he had to grab her face a little to express his frustration. Raeliana began heading back to where she left Seymour, dropping the decoy baby she held in her arms. Then Justin appeared, asking what happened to her face, touching her cheek. The Duke did not like that, and decided to grab Raeliana in front of Justin. This created an awkward silence. Retrieving the baby, she almost fell over, and the two guys caught her. Justin then remembered he was still wearing Raeliana's ring around his neck, and tried to give it back to Noah, claiming he had found it on the floor. Noah stared at it, saying it was a pity, then dropping it on the ground to step on it, because a ring decorating Justin's neck could never belong to his fiancée. Raeliana later found the maids chattering, who were excited to watch the Wynknight Knights spar. Today in particular would be one-on-one boxing matches, and they were excited to see the ripped, shirtless men. But none would excite them more than seeing the beautiful Dame Ansley take on her opponent. Raeliana was concerned, since her opponent was much bigger. However, Ansley would easily defeat her sparring partner. Returning to the Royal Library, Raeliana was losing her mind studying Old Order theology. She missed the internet. It was going to take her forever to flip through all these books manually. Justin then tapped her table, telling her to open her mouth, and tossed her a piece of candy. It made her think about how Noah didn't like sweets. She couldn't help but notice things when they shared meals every day, and his expression was something she really enjoyed. Justin had been helping prepare performances for the National Foundation Day event. The delegation from Linyang brought their royal dancers, and they were the ones who gave him the candy. They spoke a foreign language, so they couldn't quite understand each other, but he received snacks from women all the time, probably because of how handsome he was. Deciding to invite Raeliana to the event, he took her hand and placed a robe around her for disguise, since rumors would spread if the two of them were seen together. He didn't want to give her a hard time by ruining her reputation, but instead pulled her in close, getting face to face. That was his favorite way. Through some events involving Raeliana de-escalating things between her kingdom's people and the Lianganese, because she could actually speak the foreign language, the foreign dancers ended up putting her in their festive attire. She spotted Noah at the event and remembered one of the girls telling her in their country, couples getting together on the first day of snow meant they would live happily ever after. And today just happened to be the first snow. Raeliana wished she could be honest with him, be honest that she read about him in a novel where he fell in love with another woman. If he met Beatrice, would he still feel the same way as he felt about her right now? She longed for Noah, but just couldn't tell him the truth. After the event ended, Raeliana received a bag of candy from the dancers and offered to share some with Justin. He asked her to feed him one, and as she was about to, the door burst open and Noah took it right from her hand. They couldn't believe he was here. She was concerned he'd throw it up and told him to spit it out, since he didn't like sweets. But now licking her finger, he told her he did. And unfortunately, Justin got turned away. Noah had a one-on-one with his brother later. Sia explained the records of the suspected crystalline stone seller had gotten lost during a robbery incident in transit. Now that Sia had finished relaying what he had on his end, he wanted to know how many bases Noah had gotten to with Ray, so Noah decided to leave. Meanwhile, Beatrice was sloshing around a vial. She wished Raeliana had been killed during her kidnapping. Beatrice had been looking for a hitman when she met Jake Langston, and it was total coincidence that he revealed his connection to Francis Brooks. And so, she joined hands with them. Her hands then began to shake again. Her body went out of control after she fainted. She didn't have much time left, and sitting across from Vivian Schammel, things were a bit tense. Vivian didn't mean to attempt on Raeliana's life. She thought the crystalline stone had magic that took beauty away, not exploded. Regardless, she was an accomplice to Beatrice now. Beatrice hid the accounting books somewhere only she could find. She bought the crystalline stone under Vivian's name as a safety measure in case things went wrong. Since Vivian wasn't queen yet, an attempted assassination of a young noble lady would be severely punished. Presenting the vial before Vivian, Beatrice told her one drop would be enough, and that she'd go with her. Vivian was frightened, and wanted to know why Beatrice was so eager to kill Raeliana, and Beatrice answered because she wanted to change her destiny. Returning to the library on another day, the keeper offered a book he kept safe, since the New Order burned all the Old Order's books after they fell. Inside, Raeliana found a handwritten note that read, "These shameless New Order people are obsessed with accusing the Old Order of corruption. Why do we even call ourselves the Old Order in the first place? Why should a healthy religious institution perish? This is all part of the New Order scheme, but the ignorant are busy pointing fingers at the witches. They believe the witches handling spirits are against God's will. This is simply not true. Humans are spiritual beings. The witches interact with spirits out of their love of humanity." Before she could continue, she got called by an escort to bring her where Noah was. He put together this special dinner, since they couldn't go to Tratavia the other night. Brushing her hair, he was glad the scrape she received on her face from the Count was gone. Fireworks then boomed, and the two enjoyed their lovely time together. Seeing his reflection in his drink, he thought about his anxious look. The late king, his father, would look at him with eyes full of anxiety. His father was looking at his mother behind his shoulders, knowing she was taking advantage of his power. But still, he feared she might leave him. Even when Beatrix's leg was hurt because of her poisoning, his father let her get away with it. She was eventually killed by political rivals, and his father followed suit shortly. Due to illness, he had gotten nothing, but had lost everything as the king and as a father. Noah had always been disgusted by his father's anxious look, desperate for affection. And yet, looking at himself now, history was repeating. He told Raeliana, "I'm impulsive, unconditional, and downright foolish." Presenting a new ring for her, he told her to forget the other one. And now she was agonizing, realizing he found out about it. He still found a way to tease her about it, so she apologized and pleaded. He chuckled, telling her that old ring didn't mean anything, but he didn't want her to lose the new one he was putting on her finger now. She got frantic, but he grasped her hand, telling her there was no need to respond right now, and said in earnest, "I love you." Wandering about, Raeliana always thought it'd be the best feeling when a man proposed to her, but the only thing she felt right now was anxiety. On the day of the competition, Ray was stunned watching Justin defeat opponent after opponent. The winner of each round was given a camellia, and this winner would then hand the flower to the woman he was courting. So why was Raeliana getting all of them from Justin? Noah had a serious glare on his face. Ray was scared. It was like she was holding a time-ticking bomb. Now realizing who Justin was into, Sia found the whole thing to be interesting. After winning the whole competition, Justin announced wanting to share this honor with Raeliana Macmillan. He then offered a challenge to Noah, reminding him that a knight speaks with a sword, and Noah jumped down. This would be his first sword fight since becoming a duke. Justin went easy on him last time since he was prince then, but now neither of them were going to hold back. Raeliana begged Sia to end this fight, but he didn't want to. He'd kill to be in her situation right now. As the men clashed blades, Sia told her to choose one. They were continuing a duel without his permission, and should technically be arrested for disturbing an official royal event. But he was willing to let one of them go. Raeliana couldn't believe he was making her choose. Before she could say his name, a sudden explosion erupted in the arena. Noah came to her side, and the people began to evacuate. She knew of this event from the novel. It wasn't supposed to happen today. Security should have caught the member of the radical wing. There was supposed to be tight security today, but now she realized why this was happening. Heike was on a speaking tour that's been receiving strong backlash from the radical wing, and the clash between the royal guards and security knights exposed the palace to security threats. She blamed herself for changing the future. She decided to act fast, reminding Noah that he owed her one, and told him no questions asked. She wanted him to take his knights to the canal tunnel because the terrorists were there. He was unsure of how she knew this, but he kissed her forehead before heading where she requested. She then found Valder Gale, the eldest son of House Gale, who lost succession rights because of accusations that he's been supporting radicals. He warned his associate that Noah Wynknight was on his way to ruin things for them, so they set traps in case something happened. Valder drew his gun, preparing to kill Raeliana for leaking their plans to the Duke. And that's when Adam appeared, drawing his blade at them, asking where the traps were set. They weren't answering, so he slashed Valder down, asking once again. Now knowing where the traps were, Raeliana decided to go with Adam, taking Valder's gun. That way she wouldn't be a burden. Making his way, Noah thought about all the things Raeliana had told him up to this point that felt like predictions of the future. But either way, he'd command his men to kill everyone. Raeliana and Adam took on the first set of men, but suddenly hearing the explosion, she panicked, thinking Noah was in danger. Noah, meanwhile, had already found the trap and figured the radicals must be nearby. They caught up to the radicals and dismantled them with ease, except for one remaining, who Noah got jumped by, but Raeliana shot him, panting because she made it in the nick of time. She was relieved that she didn't have to worry about him, and he asked if she really was worried about him. So she hit him back with the classic, "No, I just left something in the canal." Things were wrapping up, except one of the radicals grinned, and now Noah was horrified, trying to get Raeliana away as the last explosion set off. Raeliana was relieved to hear Noah's heart still beating. He was glad she was alright, but her smile turned to horror as blood dripped onto her hand. His arm was gone. She ripped some of her dress, trying to stop the bleeding. He told her not to cry, but she just couldn't stop. He insisted he was fine, even wiping her tears. But she just kept telling him he wasn't. She blamed herself for the terrorist attack and injury, and admitted she came back to life and changed the future. This wasn't supposed to happen. She cried out to him that her soul was from another world, that this world was a world she read about in a novel, that she already died once, woke up in this body, and knew all the events from the book, including the royal seal, but her soul didn't settle down in this body properly, which was why she fainted for 10 days. None of this made sense to Noah, but if she was telling the truth, it would explain everything. She pulled out the bell that Heike gave her, attempting to use it on his arm, but he begged her not to. The thing he feared more than losing his arm was that she might fall asleep and never wake up again. But she decided to focus on the present, hoping he'd do the same, and told him she loved him. He was stunned. She activated the bell, and with his arm restored, the two kissed. They cuddled, waiting for help, and things started to get spicy between Noah and Ray. The Foundation Day events were cancelled after just 2 days. Although the king wrapped the incident up by promising a thorough investigation of the crime, countless commoners had already lost their lives. Meanwhile, aristocrats, who suffered relatively less, found a reason to blame the king. Later, checking on Raeliana's scream back at the mansion, Noah had to dodge a pillow being thrown at him. She was so embarrassed. She'd been walking around with a hickey he left on her neck. He pressed at his arm, and she thought it was still hurting. However, he'd used this as a ploy to pull her onto him. She didn't find this funny, and cuddling her, he promised he wouldn't do that again. He then tossed her down onto the bed, staring at her face up close. Raeliana got out of this, saying she was hungry and wanted to eat right now. So he let it go, but told her that next time he couldn't promise he'd wait. Switching to more serious topics, Noah asked about if the issue with her body rejecting her soul had something to do with how she died in another world. They discussed things like Raeliana's original soul, her highness Sora's soul, and issues between the old and new order. Noah pondered the idea that Raeliana's original soul might still be somewhere, and that could be related to her current condition. Raeliana then brought up the author of the Old Order book she read, and the Black Witch had adopted a small child to succeed the witch's powers later in life. And if this child was as powerful as written in the book, she might still be alive. After Raeliana got ready for the ball to end the National Foundation event, Noah gave her a smooch, telling her she was beautiful and that he couldn't take his eyes off of her. But that was enough out of him. They were already running late to the event. At the ball, Raeliana needed to fix her dress, but unfortunately got caught by Vivian, who dragged her into having tea. But Raeliana did not drink it, instead shocking Vivian as she asked if she was the one responsible for the crystalline stone. Raeliana could also tell her tea was poisoned. She was about to run to have the tea examined, but dropped her cup, seeing Beatrice standing before her with an empty look in her eyes. Raeliana's head started throbbing, just like the day she passed out by the tower. She asked Beatrice what she was doing here. However, she was completely different from the Beatrice she read about. Watching Beatrice lock the door, Raeliana brought up that they were supposed to be friends, and Beatrice responded they were, until 5 months ago, the day Eunha became Raeliana. Beatrice grabbed Ray and had Vivian knock her out. They then tied her up, and Beatrice doused the room with oil, lit a match, and set the room on fire, only saying goodbye to Ray before taking off with Vivian. When they were gone, Raeliana undid her bindings, thankful that Vivian wasn't skilled in that respect. She went for the door, but was horrified because it was barred from the other side. She banged and screamed for help as the fire approached her. The king then got alerted of multiple fires breaking out in the building and had everyone evacuate. Noah went to Adam for help, since he couldn't find Ray anywhere. Raeliana was on the 4th floor, so jumping through the window was risky. She didn't know what Beatrice's deal was, but when she made it out of here, she was going to give payback. Adam and Noah were breaking down the walls of the venue, searching for Raeliana. Noah eventually found her climbing down the 4th floor window and pulled her up right before she was about to jump. Everyone made it out safely. Outside, Raeliana was waiting for Noah and Adam to return, and spotted Beatrice heading into the woods. She decided to trail her and saw Beatrice grabbing onto Noah. He wasn't pushing her away. Did he sense that they were meant to be? It felt like they were center stage, because Raeliana was just a supporting character, after all. Where the knights were still investigating, Justin spotted his sister scrambling to leave. He was worried about her, but she assured him she was fine. He thought of her to always be a bit moody, perhaps because they've spoiled her since their mother's death, but picked up as of late, she was unusually sensitive and irritable. However, as she took off, he spotted the poison vial she accidentally dropped. Raeliana hated this. All the doubt, the jealousy, and giving up. She hated all of it. Beatrice asked why her heart pounded looking at Noah. With her touching his chest, Ray pulled her arm away, asking how she liked playing with fire. Beatrice denied it, with a cold look on her face, calling Ray a liar, but Noah would grab Beatrice's hand, saying she unmistakably reeked of oil. Beatrice was caught, and tried to make an excuse that she dropped her lantern. Noah then pulled Raeliana, and immediately figured out Beatrice set the palace on fire, and tried to kill her. That's when Duke Blake arrived, asking if Noah had already met his adopted daughter, Beatrice, and seeing her suddenly go into some kind of panic attack, Raeliana suddenly hugged her, saying it was so nice to see her again. They were at a stalemate, since Raeliana didn't have concrete evidence that Beatrice started the fire, and Beatrice couldn't afford to compromise her position. Beatrice just whispered it was such a pity Ray survived, and Ray told her to smile and try to look happy before pushing her off. Beatrice left, cold expression unchanging as she went with her father. Raeliana then went to Noah's side and told him the novel she read about their world was titled Beatrice. She was the protagonist, who who would meet him because she found the royal seal at Robert's grave, and after encountering each other a few times, they'd eventually fall in love. Noah could tell Ray was jealous, and had her backed against a tree, where he pulled her in close, telling her he was sorry for upsetting her, and that he loved her. He only wanted to double-check the oil he smelt from Beatrice, and the strange sense of distance he felt between him and her. Raeliana was the only person who made his heart race. She got too embarrassed with him leaning in for a kiss, so he decided to pick her up and drag her away. He was never going to let her go. Later, having heard about the ways they tried to kill her, and that they hit her head, he became angry seeing the wound. They weren't sure why Beatrice wanted to kill her, but what Ray did know for sure is that Beatrice knew she wasn't the same Raeliana from 5 months ago. At the St. Bell isolated high-security prison, Wheaton was assigned by Noah to meet with the Black Witch, who was taught by the previous. The woman had been locked up here since before the current prison director, and the records indicate she's likely been here for more than 70 years. When Wheaton entered, he asked if she was Iosa Ben, and she just responded that she hated whole wheat bread because it was hard and rough, and that she hadn't had soft white bread in ages. As a child, she was adopted by Wilter Ben, the author of the book found in the Royal Library. Wheaton initially traveled to Wilter's hometown in search of her, but learned from a local that she was imprisoned in St. Bell. Looking back at Wheaton, she smirked, referring to him as a knight of one of the bigwigs, and laid out her cards. Reading that Wheaton had left his abusive alcoholic father as a kid, and lived as other people's shadow since then, and that he covered his master's butt for a living. She gasped, seeing the Reaper card that meant destruction, and told him it would rain when he dried his laundry, he'd step on mud putting on his new shoes, stub his toe on a dresser, and break his nose on a fall. If he wanted a bright future, he needed to do a lot of good deeds. These revelations were so scary for him, he felt like she deserved to be locked up here. Now with things getting serious, she was willing to answer his question, as long as he paid a fair price. Back at the Duke's mansion, Ansley brought Noah the intel report on Beatrice. She became friends with Raeliana while living in the orphanage Raeliana's mother volunteered at, and received a scholarship from the Temple Foundation to study at the International P-Arts School of Theology, only to disappear one day. Later, she approached Duke Aaron Blake and became his adopted daughter. Noah then commanded Ansley to watch Beatrice closely and take action when everything was ready. He looked over at Raeliana resting beside him, thinking she must be so tired. He was willing to do anything and everything for her. All he needed was for her to stay by his side. Sia would later tell Noah to not do anything that would cause Duke Blake to betray them. He felt bad for the man, considering he lost 2 daughters to a plague. The neighboring country was on a brink of territorial war, where Duke Blake's manor resided nearby. Sia would be in a tough spot if Duke Blake turned on them during a dispute. But to this, Noah would reveal Beatrice was the one who started the fire at the venue, with Vivian as her accomplice. Sia did not want to deal with this bad news, but he could tell Noah was a lot angrier than usual. Sia's gripe is that Noah had no evidence. Even though he trusted his brother telling the truth, he could not punish unjustly, but Noah didn't care. He threatened to kill Vivian and Beatrice right now if Sia didn't allow him to passage to the foreign country where Heike was campaigning at. If Noah was permitted that much, he would find the evidence needed to take legal action against the 2 conspiring women. And so, with a lot of nudging, Sia agreed to let Noah do what he wanted. Back at the Duke's mansion, Iosa was eating voraciously, here officially as Noah's guest. Noah offered to release her from St. Bell officially if she could tell him how to fix a soul that refused to stay in its body. To this, she told him she saw 2 women, and that he was meant to be with the blonde one. She gave him a recommendation: kill the brunette. That way, he'd live happily ever after with Blondie. Coming face to face with Raeliana, she instantly pointed out that Eunha's soul was transferred into her body. She couldn't do much to help Raeliana with her mismatched soul and body issue, but she was willing to answer 2 questions. Who put Eunha in Raeliana's body, and why? She suddenly flicked Raeliana's forehead, and it caused her childhood memories from this world to come flooding in. She loved books, even as a child, but understood she wasn't the protagonist in her own story. Meanwhile, Beatrice was fixated on the fierce glare Noah gave her before. Duke Blake found his daughter, and seeing her in front of a statue, he assumed she was praying and called her a good girl. He couldn't believe Noah would try to hurt her, but he prepared the coach, just as his daughter requested. They ended up punishing Iosa for harming Raeliana, but she was fine. She wanted Iosa to do it again, so she could see more of her past, but unfortunately, That was the best the Black Witch could do. Raeliana couldn't make any conclusions from what she learned though. All she understood is that the Raeliana before her was sick and tired of her life. What she wished she had seen was the point in time Raeliana met with the previous Black Witch. She felt awful, so Noah came up behind her to tell her not to let someone else's memories consume her. She then turned around to hold him, and the two lovers embraced for comfort. With Ansley reporting things were ready, Noah felt something was off about his plan to assassinate Beatrice. He thought about the promise he made to bring evidence to convict her to his brother, and what Eunha told him about killing Raeliana. However, he told Ansley to proceed with the plan. Beatrice wondered if her plan failed, but then a Blake House servant came in, informing them the carriage was attacked. She then came in to hug her father, smiling with him being angry that Noah had crossed the line. Sia later met with Noah privately and was not happy at the assassination attempt. Duke Blake's carriage was attacked, and they found a broken blade inside. They had no proof Noah did this, but Noah was making it evident to Sia that he did. Sia brought up Noah was only 12 years old when he had first taken him to this cellar for a drink, and after Noah got drunk, their father forbade them from entering again. Sia told Noah there was nothing he could do for him now, and that he crossed the line by breaking his promise. He hoped Noah would let off some steam before proceeding any further. While Noah was out, Ray went to meet with Eunha, who was screeching, "Which part of no rye bread did you not understand?" However, Noah had told the chefs to prepare loaves of extra crispy rye bread as dry as possible, and Ray knew this was no mistake. She had Adam cut Eunha down and tempted the witch with white bread and meat to eat, as long as she did the thing that helped her recall Ray's past again. However, Eunha was serious about her magic not being fully charged. She wasn't all-powerful like Heike, and couldn't just fire spells whenever she wanted. Eunha readied herself as best she could, cracking her wrist, then slapped Raeliana, and we turned to Beatrice learning Ray's engagement was broken off. Beatrice tried to assure Ray, saying it was probably for the best and to cheer up. However, Ray had overheard the conversation her fiancé had with his friends, where they called her submissive and boring, and that she probably wouldn't say a word, even if he had a mistress. Beatrice was startled, remembering the kids at the orphanage were probably waiting for her, and scurried off. Ray wondered if Beatrice were in her place, would she have fared better with her engagement? That's when the Black Witch approached, calling Ray a poor little soul because fate was going to have her killed by her man. She offered to change Raeliana's fate. On a particular late night with Noah returning home, Raeliana was waiting for him. She wanted to know if something was going on, since he hadn't been home in days now. So he asked her if she was going to stay and watch him undress again. To this, she started taking off his tie herself and told him, "Why don't you show me everything, your royal highness?" She pushed him onto the bed, admitting she used to want to see him with his guard down, because he was so arrogant. He asked if she was seducing him, and leaned in close to admit everything that happened involving the attack on one of Duke Blake's carriages. He wanted to minimize risks, but now understood he should have been more careful. Duke Blake somehow knew he was being targeted and had someone else in the coach, and now he was pressuring Noah with false evidence. Duke Blake was using this to put Noah on the front lines as a commander for the war with the neighboring nation of Gothberg. Raeliana remembered this event. After its fall, the empire split into Chambers and Gothberg. The two countries were bordered by a river, along which lay a holy ground that no one had stepped foot in for 1,000 years. The two nations left the holy ground as a buffer zone. However, tensions escalated when a smuggler snuck into the territory and found a mine. The two nations were fighting for the mine resources, but Raeliana knew the mine contained almost no reserves, a fact that wouldn't reveal itself until after the war was over. She started to scratch her head, trying to think of a solution, but Noah would distract her by playfully biting her finger and pulling her in for a passionate kiss. Making out for a bit, she pulled herself out to catch her breath and told him that was enough, but he just touched her face and asked if she was ready for more before he started going in again. The next day, while Noah was gone for his meeting with Sia and Blake about the war, Raeliana couldn't move at all. She tried to get more sleep, but thinking about last night, she rolled over and fell onto the floor with embarrassment. She then noticed an invitation to the opening for Soroso's salon Noah had been keeping from her. She suspected Soroso was opening up her salon to keep Vivian in check, since the wedding was just around the corner. At the opening event, Beatrice's grin caused the other ladies to wince and flinch. She knew those gathered here were relatives of the de facto rulers of this kingdom. She was going to make this place hers. Rayliana then entered the scene, causing Vivian to become anxious. But Beatrice remained cold. The other women were whispering about how thin Rayliana was looking, with her fiancé being on the battlefront of war. However, Rayliana had the upper hand, announcing that Noah's deployment was delayed because the mines had no resources, and they relayed this information through an official document. Beatrice smiled, saying, "What a relief," saying she was worried because she didn't want him to go either. Her performance was excellent. No one would ever guess that she tried to burn Rayliana alive. Rayliana would then reach for Vivian, pointing out she didn't look so good, and asked if something was on her mind. Beatrice would pull Rayliana's hand off Vivian, saying their queen-to-be just had a mild cold, and found an excuse to let Vivian leave. And with Vivian seeing the two, she couldn't believe how composed they were. She didn't want to be stuck between and let them take advantage of her. She felt like she needed to do something. Drinking her tea, Rayliana thought about how this Beatrice was different from the one in her old memories. The gentle and innocent protagonist in the novel was nowhere to be found. Noah suddenly approached her, and now Rayliana was nervous that he somehow found out. He wasn't sure how she gathered the stamina to escape the house, but he was glad she at least felt better now. Late at night at the mansion, Rayliana stumbled upon Eunha smuggling food in the middle of the night. She suddenly grabbed Rayliana, telling her she didn't have much time left and would die soon. Eunha had once tried to help a man who came to her because he also had the wrong soul in his body. The second time he passed out, he died and never came back. Rayliana pleaded for a solution, but all Eunha told her was that she would soon meet the woman who did this to her. In a private meeting between Sia and Justin revealed he found proof through the poison vial his sister dropped that Beatrice devised some kind of scheme to assassinate Rayliana. He held back on telling Sia immediately, since his sister was involved, and from this, Sia summoned Noah and Ray. Through some discussion between everyone, Rayliana asked to use Sia's wedding to corner Beatrice. She was going to set things up by making Beatrice target her at the wedding. With everyone still wondering why Beatrice was trying to kill her, Ray reasoned that Rayliana's actual soul might be in Beatrice's body. She noticed Beatrice exhibiting a strange reaction when she called her Rayliana back at Soroso's salon opening. Where was Beatrice's actual soul? She wasn't too sure. On the day of the royal wedding, Vivian's heart was beating with anxiety. Both the poison bottle and her brother were gone. She wondered if he knew the crime she committed. She wished she could run to Justin, tell him everything, and ask for help. She wished she could tell him that she was used, and that Beatrice was behind all this. Rayliana sat down because of a headache, thinking of the last words the Black Witch told Rayliana, which were, "If you don't want to decide who should die first, take the initiative." Vivian suddenly came into her room, and she stumbled into Rayliana's arms with her back pierced, and Beatrice standing behind as the perpetrator. Rayliana thought she was out of her mind, but then Beatrice suddenly screamed. Everyone was flooding into the room, and Beatrice put on her crocodile tears, telling them Rayliana killed the queen. No one knew the odds were stacked against them. Beatrice was accusing Rayliana of murder, and Ray was not feeling well. Sia entered, asking Beatrice what she witnessed, but Duke Blake interjected, saying Rayliana murdered the queen. However, Sia wouldn't take this, asking for Beatrice to answer instead. She claimed she heard two people loudly arguing in the lounge next to hers, but Rayliana countered that the knights were guarding her room, and all of them admitted to hearing no arguing. So, Beatrice was the only one who was claiming to have heard an argument, and the only one accusing Rayliana of killing the queen. To this, Beatrice pulled out the receipt that cited Vivian as purchasing the crystalline stone that was used to attempt to assassinate Rayliana, citing it as Ray's motivation to kill Vivian. Ray couldn't believe Beatrice had prepared this, but she then fell into Noah's arms from exhaustion. Duke Blake was calling for the arrest of Rayliana, and Sia knew he had no choice. However, Noah would call for Adam, giving everyone a warning. Whoever touched Rayliana, he would kill them. Justin finally arrived from his mission and brought along Heika, who commanded them to stop. Beatrice was panicking now. She couldn't believe the high priest was here. If he hadn't intervened, Rayliana would have been killed from an accident while under arrest for killing the queen. If Rayliana was taken to the Holy Kingdom, she'd never be able to kill her. Beatrice's hands stopped shaking, just like when she stabbed Vivian in the back. She was determined to not let Rayliana escape. Justin was angry, finding out Beatrice had killed his sister, and his mission didn't go well, since all the accounting books for the assassins were bought under Vivian's name instead of Beatrice's. He knew his sister would never try to kill someone, but Duke Blake would step in, insisting that Rayliana killed Vivian. but this only made Justin more angry. He started arguing with Duke Blake, but Heike would soon get them to shut up. Heike picked up the accounting receipt and used his magic to recall the history of its purchase, being none other than Beatrice. A shocking revelation for Duke Blake. Heike demanded to know where this woman who tried to kill his granddaughter was. Unfortunately, she was wheeling Raeliana as laundry while being disguised as a maid. She told the guard in front of Raeliana's room that she saw someone suspicious downstairs, and he left immediately to go look for them. She could have killed Ray on the spot, but chose not to in order to mitigate risk. Her plan was to make it look like Raeliana, whose crime had been discovered, faked fainting and then escaped. She wished she had just pretended to be Ray's friend to backstab her back then, but she was so afraid to get blood on her hands. It was as if her original nature was still clinging on. The witch had told her back then that she was the protagonist of her own story, and that she would live an unremarkable life until she faced tragic death, because every story was written by the goddess. Dumping Raeliana out of the laundry, Beatrice wondered when she acquired the gun. She considered using it, but thought it might be too loud. Back then, Raeliana didn't want to do this initially, since Beatrice was still her friend. However, the witch reasoned Beatrice's soul would soon perish, and another would occupy her body. Why not let her occupy instead of the other person? She gave Raeliana the potion to drink on the correct day, whereafter she'd wake up in Beatrice's body. She would become the wife of a powerful and attractive man, and there would be no shortage of people enamored by her bubbly personality and beautiful smile. She would live happily ever after, loved by everyone, because that was Beatrice's fate. She warned Raeliana that spirits rejected incompatible bodies, and the body she transferred into would go through abnormal reactions until the other, more compatible body perished. One of them would end up dead anyway if enough time passed. All she needed to do was kill the woman in her old body first. And so, she took the blade and stabbed down. Back on the library rooftop, Eunha was surprised to meet someone who looked like a man, but spoke with the voice of a woman. The woman told her she was a writer, looking to cast a character in her work, but just hadn't found the right soul yet. She wanted Eunha to join the cast. Eunha couldn't accept, since she needed to get into college. So, the woman offered her college admission. That's when Eunha saw her acceptance on her phone, and when she began to celebrate, the woman pushed her off the building while calling her Beatrice. The blade was dripping with blood, as Beatrice was begging Ray to just die. But Ray held the blade back. When Eunha called Beatrice out as the true Raeliana Macmillan, Beatrice hesitated and got pushed back. Eunha couldn't believe Raeliana was trying to kill her for such a trivial reason, but Beatrice claimed she had no choice. However, our Raeliana reasoned she always had a choice. After all, she's been doing just fine in Raeliana's body. She called Ray foolish for thinking she was the most miserable person in the world. Beatrice screamed out, asking what she should have done. Raeliana taunted her, saying, "Why ask me? You should have asked your mother. Not that you can anymore." Ouch. Our Ray was grateful for the new wonderful parents and little sister she inherited, and asked if Ray was happy in her new body. Beatrice got angry, lunging for another attack, but would find herself disarmed. Ray knew Noah would come for her, just like he promised. He let Beatrice go, and she scrambled for the blade, while the two lovers flirted a bit. Beatrice tried to attack again, but he would just disarm her again. She then screamed, telling Raeliana she could never get her body back if she killed her now, that Raeliana would never escape her role, a fate written by the goddess that would follow her for the rest of her life. Raeliana didn't care, instead lifting up her pistol and pointing it towards Beatrice. She read the book that told everything about Beatrice's future, that she was destined to live happily ever after. But Ray didn't need any of that. From predestined futures to encounters, she's changed so many things over time, and decided she'd write her own future, firing the shot that would bring Beatrice to her end. She told Noah she saw it earlier, the past, where the witch had told the original Raeliana one of them needed to die, which was why she was so obsessed with killing Eunha. Noah comforted Raeliana and told her she did the right thing. We later moved to Lord Shamel crying at his daughter's funeral. Justin came by to apologize to Raeliana on behalf of his sister, and while she didn't like Vivian, she didn't resent her enough to expect an apology from her family during her funeral. But Justin was thankful she killed Vivian's murderer. Duke Blake tried to enter, but immediately got kicked out by Lord Shamel, and this was dubbed the shocking fall of House Blake. The trial took place after the funeral. Duke Blake's faction halved due to eroded trust in his leadership after having been deceived by his late daughter. He was desperate to keep the matter as private as possible. Therefore, Raeliana proposed him a deal, and they won big. Property was one of the assets she took from him, which included a part of his land and vacation home. Riding the train there, Noah pulled her back towards him, telling her she could enjoy the view from here, even though she wanted to see closer. He sat her in a more comfortable position, and she asked him how much the land would sell for. She wanted to start a private school foundation, and was thinking the money she made off the vacation home would help. But Noah just told her she didn't need to sell it, since House Wynknight could just pay for the school. In times like these, she was glad to have such a rich husband. His point being, he wanted her to do whatever made her happy, and not worry about anything. He just didn't want her to come home late. However, she'd quip back that he was the one who was always late, and found it really cute how pouty he'd get when she taunted him. She told him, "Good boy," and the two kissed, getting a little frisky until she pushed him back. She didn't want things to get too crazy on the train. Going back to the school topic, she didn't have a grand reason for wanting to start one. She just wanted there to be a school for girls, because she wanted Rosemary to have more options in life. At the moment, the Pure School of Theology was the only higher education institution that accepted women. For that reason, it drew female applicants from all over the world, and created fierce competition. Ray also wanted to be a teacher in her past life. Granted, she gained a dream of a different future once she settled in this world. The train stopped before reaching its destination because of snow. The conductor came in to tell them the room next to theirs had a broken window, and asked to let them take in their neighbors, since it was quite cold. So, Emily and her father came on in. Emily's eyes sparkled staring at Noah, and she whispered to Raeliana, which got her giggling. Noah decided to step out for a minute, and the father followed him. But when they went out, the girl revealed that the man who was next to them was not her father. Her father was the conductor. Outside, Noah asked the goddess if she rewrote Raeliana's story, since Ray gave up on becoming Beatrice. But she didn't. She had just as much fun letting Raeliana decide her own fate. The goddess then possessed Emily. That way, she could talk to Raeliana privately. She made this ploy, figuring Noah wouldn't let the two of them talk otherwise. The goddess allowed Raeliana one question that she'd answer. It could even be one about how to return to her original world. Did she not miss her family? When the goddess told Noah about this, Noah considered taking Raeliana far away, somewhere even the goddess couldn't find them. He just couldn't let Raeliana go. He wouldn't let her go. But the only question Ray wanted to know is if she would have gotten an acceptance notice into a university, even if she hadn't come to this world, and was happy to know she in fact would. She felt so relieved. And while she was curious about how her family back in the other world was doing, she just couldn't imagine living in a world without Noah. The goddess then told Noah he had nothing to worry about. Ray wasn't the least bit interested in leaving him behind. After the goddess left Emily's body, Raeliana went outside of Noah, and he started laughing all of a sudden, admitting he thinks he fell in love with her at first sight. He fell completely in love the very moment she came up to him. He liked the way she looked at him at the garden full of ever-blooming roses. They then arrived at their new vacation home. It was a castle. Raeliana could see why Duke Blake was so sad to give it up now. Getting off the train, the two made their way to their new place. From now on, they'd focus on spending happy moments together. Then, many, many years later, when the goddess takes their souls and sends them to their next lives, they'd forget everything that happened. And even with her not remembering him in the next world, he would always come find her. Raeliana thought the new castle was so beautiful. She loved the sound of the waves and the pretty bedroom, but hated being stuck inside. Because of the heavy snow, it'd be 2 days until the others could come. So it'd just be her and Noah alone together. Ooh. She was so happy to lay in bed carefree and have her handsome man feed her chocolate-covered almonds. She wanted to get them drinks next, but with it being too cold downstairs, Noah stopped her. So she decided they'd play rock, paper, scissors, where the loser goes downstairs for the drinks. She had to explain the rules to him since this game didn't exist in this world. And he lost 7 times in a row. Getting fed more, she pointed out the treats were so yummy, it was too bad he didn't eat sweets. So he suddenly got a taste from it, mouth-to-mouth style, and reminded her he did like sweets now. As he was going to feel up on her, she caught his hand. He was just too playful sometimes. However, he challenged her to rock, paper, scissors to decide if they'd get busy. And now, he won 15 times in a row. He played innocent, assuring her there's no way he was cheating. Since this was his first time playing and getting on top of her, he reminded her there was no need to be shy. The morning after, Noah thought about all the measures he took to make sure this experience was perfect for Rei. He asked for a beautiful view she could enjoy and had the windows insulated so that the cold ocean breeze didn't simmer in. Soft, fluffy bed sheets because she preferred lying in bed as opposed to sitting on a sofa. A wide variety of snacks since she prefers to snack than eat full meals. She liked fruits, but not raisins. As she began to rustle, waking up, she moaned that he was so rough. He apologized if she didn't like it, but she said it was fine. She just couldn't keep up. They decided to play out in the snow together, where he wrote Noah Wynknight, and it made her chuckle. Then, he showed her camellia flowers in the snow. She felt this was all familiar, and remembered back to the night he had read the romance novel she really liked. And he reenacted her favorite scene, getting down on one knee to say, "Will you be my companion for the rest of my life?" Tears began to well up in her face before she jumped to embrace him, replying, "Yes." On the day of their wedding, Heike was telling Wade he could officiate the wedding himself, but Wade was worried he'd curse the groom. Rayliana was adorned beautifully in a white dress, courtesy of her stylist, Nick. She was so nervous though, she felt like she might throw up. He pointed out that at least she seemed much happier here than at her engagement ceremony. Before, she seemed much more like a cow on the way to the slaughterhouse. She began thinking back on how her relationship with Noah started out transactional, and had no idea things would turn out like this. Stepping outside, her parents greeted her with smiling faces, and she started smiling, walking towards her handsome, soon-to-be husband. Afterwards, alone together, Ray caught Noah off guard by asking him who he wanted their child to take after. He's never given much thought to having children, but he thought a child that looked like Ray might be lovely, and told her he hoped their child didn't take after him. But she didn't mind. She thought Noah was adorable. Later, Heike stole Ray, taking her to one of the new temples he renovated. This place used to be full of priests and holy knights, but he reduced the number of staff due to his introverted nature. He liked the quietness. She asked him if he felt lonely here, but no, he liked being alone. Then, she asked him why he never adopted children, and soon figured he made her his granddaughter to help him translate the scriptures. She had no problem coming by more often, and telling him she'd even bring her child too. He was perfectly fine with it. Later, Heike was completely annoyed that Noah snuck in uninvited, but he smiled, thinking of their future child coming to visit him someday. Arya snuck out during bedtime, even though Ray told her to stay in her room. Ray scolded her daughter for being more like her father, coming out even though she knows she wasn't supposed to. Noah then took his daughter to put her to bed, giving Ray a kiss before tucking Arya in. And after getting her father to read her a bedtime story, Arya would soon fall asleep. We then see a black-haired woman walking the streets of Gangnam, talking to her sister. The people around were in awe, wondering if the man approaching was some kind of model, or perhaps an actor. And when the man bumped into her, he grabbed her hand and said, "Found you." And they lived happily ever after. Man, I'm so glad for the happy ending. This was a great series I had covered the anime for last year, but it cut off right after the Crystalline Stone event. Now, there was a lot of stuff I had to cut out for the sake of consistency of story flow, like other character mini-arcs, such as Ceatric, Adam, Ansley, Rayliana's family, Justin. There were far more panels describing them that I just felt would have interrupted the pace of the video. Also, a lot of back and forth joking and quipping between Rayliana and Noah, which were funny and very cute, but just had no place to be told here in a way that I thought would make sense. So I highly encourage you to go check out the manhwa yourself and read those parts to get a full breath on all the funny and cute moments the series has to offer. Subscribe for more content, but for now, watch this next video. It's me, ComfyTea. I'll see you all in the next one.